Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Making Waves, our inside look at Roosevelt University athletics. Joined now in this edition by Roosevelt University men's volleyball coach Kelly Magliano. And Coach, thanks for joining us today. And you've just been able to complete a season here in 2025. What's your assessment of how the season went?
Well, first, Tom, thank you for having me. Overall, the season was not, what we were hoping for. I think in October, right when we were just getting into the heart of our fall season, we dealt with some injuries very early on, and that's not always fun for a program. Overall, though, I do think that while we didn't necessarily win as much as we wanted on the court, right, we won in a lot of different areas. I think there's a lot to take away from this season, a lot of things to, make better moving forward. And I think we, are a little bit closer to knowing what it is we need in order to be successful in the NCAA.
One thing I wanted to talk to you about, and that is team development during the course of the season. And just as you were finishing the last answer, it sounds like you are pleased with the team the way it did develop as the season went along.
Yeah, I would say that we were probably playing our best volleyball towards the end of the year. And that's, what you can hope for is making sure that there is development, within the team, within the lineup, individual development between players as the season goes on. I do think that we achieved that. And like I said, I think we found a lineup that worked for us towards the end of the year, and that helped us be a little bit more successful in our last few games.
As a coach, as you're analyzing the play and seeing how the team progresses, is there a dramatic difference from the way the team performs at the start of a season as opposed to the end of the season?
I think that depends on each team that you have and goes from season to season. There are some years where, you start at one level and you only grow a little bit, but that's all that's needed in order to be successful, right? And then there's, other teams that we've had, especially here at Roosevelt, where there is a big jump from the beginning of the season until the end. As for this year, I think the main differences that we saw from the beginning of the year until the end is figuring out how to work together a little bit better on the court. We have a pretty close team off of the court. On the court, sometimes we struggle to be able to figure it out. And I think that towards the end of the year, that was probably one of our more significant differences of understanding, how each other plays and how we are able to put that together as a team to give us our best outcome.
As far as team progression goes, it sounds as if it depends on the particular season and how that season is going, and that determines how far a team will progress.
Yeah, I think, the schedule has a lot to do with it, right? What teams are you playing in the beginning of the year? What teams are you playing at the end of the year? And generally, we want to put, the toughest teams at the beginning of the year just to prepare us for the end of the year schedule as well as the conference schedule, right? Next year we're going to be in a tough conference in the Great Lakes Valley Conference. And, we played a majority of those teams that are going to be in that conference next year this season. And I feel that conference is a conference that can go either way, right? Everybody's kind of at the same level, high level, and, has the ability to compete and win against each other. And so, from the beginning of the season till the end of the season, you want to play your tougher opponents at the beginning to prepare you for, the teams where it's the games that can go either way. And in the games that can go either way, because you've prepared playing those tougher opponents, right now you have the tools, hopefully the confidence to be able to perform against the opponents that are at your level or just a little bit better.
Do you feel this past season the early matches were the type of preparation that you wanted as the season went along?
I mean, we opened up with Lewis University to start out. They're a top 10 team in the NCAA Division 1 to 2 for men's volleyball. So I do think that, we did play our tougher opponents in the beginning. And I think us having the confidence and the, mental toughness to be able to do that, especially with us just transitioning to NCAA volleyball from an NAIA institution, I feel that, that did help us out a little bit in knowing, hey, this is what we have to expect, and this is what we need to prepare to be for the next couple of years as we, make the transition and try to be successful as a Division II program.
You know, it seems almost regardless of the season, there's always going to be a pretty healthy mix of experience on any team, and I'm sure this past season was no exception. As far as the group of seniors that you had this past season, how about the impact? What about the role that the seniors were able to play in setting the program culture and the standards for the program?
Well, we're losing 8 seniors, and that's hard for any team, right, to lose that much experience and that much leadership. So that group of 8, majority of them are transfers. We had a couple of them that started their freshman year and played all 4 years with us. That group really kind of set the tone. That was probably our first, high level recruiting class. And, they came in and knew that we were a building program and knew that we were, trying to make our program relevant. And I think that, they really tried their hardest to help with that. And as they leave, we're definitely going to feel the loss. There's, like I said, a lot of leadership, a lot of experience within that group. But after our last match that we had this past Friday, I have the seniors speak in the locker room every year at the end of our last match and kind of give advice to the younger guys. And, a lot of them had the same message, and be grateful for the program that we have, be grateful for what we've built, and understand that as long as you keep working and, continue to buy into the culture that it is we're trying to build, that this program can go somewhere. So we give a lot of credit to those 8 seniors. If, when we find success, right, within our program and we finally have that winning season that we've, been working so hard for, they're definitely a group that we can attribute that credit to.
And it's interesting, too, year after year, as I've observed so many teams over the years, it seems that regardless of the sport, having a group of seniors being able to mentor the younger players on the team, the seniors can give advice and can give guidance that's invaluable, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, each student athlete experiences being a student athlete differently. But there's, always that one common underlying theme, right? That each person experiences depending on the team and program that they play with. And I think that, this group of 8 seniors, the common thing that they have is understanding, the value of hard work. Our program started, not in good shape, and the last couple of years we've really spent building it and building it and building it. And I think those 8 seniors understand that they're part of that foundation, and I think that's the message that they were trying to convey to the younger guys.
Looking back on this most recent completed season, what are the most prominent lessons that you learned from the season this year?
That's a heavy question, Tom. I think overall, the last couple of years here have been hard for us. Like I said, we haven't had a winning season. There was a lot of things that, we're trying to make better in a short amount of time. And I think some of the bigger things that I've taken away from this season is just to be able to appreciate that process. I know I've grown a lot as a coach over the last couple of years, and I think last season, I didn't spend time appreciating the little things. I was promoting that to the kids, right? Always be grateful for the fact that we have the privilege to be able to be student athletes and the privilege to compete at a college level. However, I don't think I was genuinely doing that, right? Genuinely appreciating that. And so like I said, even though our season didn't go well in the win column, right, or how we had hoped, I did spend a lot of time just spending time with the guys and, watching them grow in little areas and watching our program grow in little areas and really just kind of appreciating the small wins. So I think that's probably the biggest thing I'll take with me moving forward. And obviously there's, other things that we have to work on and we will work on them, right? And I make sure to, make changes every year if changes are needed. And so we will make them. But definitely being more appreciative this year was something that I think helped me out as a coach, and I think that helped the kids too.
Over the course of your career as a coach, how has your coaching style developed now over the last few seasons?
Well, when I started, I had just been promoted twice within 6 months from a graduate assistant to an assistant. And then, a month before school started in August of 2021, the old head coach left, and, Mike came to me and said, "Hey, you're going to be interim head." And I was like, "Oh, okay, great." I didn't really have any idea what I was doing. So I think, how I've changed is really just understanding the recruiting landscape a little bit better, and, understanding what type of kids it is that we want within our program. I thought there was a certain type of kid I wanted at the beginning. And I think that's changed over the course of time. And I think that I've been trying to only control the things I can. I think early on in my career, I tried to control everything because I thought I was supposed to. And I think, now I'm really just trying to control the things that I know I can control, and give that message to the boys as well.
You mentioned the quick progression from being a grad assistant all the way up to being interim head coach and then eventually head coach. Mm-hmm. That was such a compressed time frame. It had to have been a whirlwind for you.
I think I handled it well. There were moments definitely when I was overwhelmed, but I had a lot of support during that time from the administration here at Roosevelt and from other coaches that we have in the office, and a lot of the older coaches that have a little bit more experience than I do tried their best to make sure that I felt supported and would give me advice when needed. And so yeah, it was a little overwhelming, but I do like a challenge, and I think that I took that challenge on and faced it pretty well.
One thing I'm curious to ask about, and that is during a match. Most of the time as I'm at courtside attempting to describe the action, not always successfully, but the game is so quick.
Yes.
What are you looking for as you're on the bench watching each match go by point? What specifically are you looking for?
So generally we divvy up responsibility among the staff, right? So my graduate assistant, he's taking in-game stats. So I kind of just have him paying attention to, what are we passing right now? Who's passing well? Who should we have in the pattern? Who right now is hitting the most efficiently? Who should we have our setter give the ball to maybe a little bit more? On the other side, who on the other side is not passing well? Who should we target somebody differently? So I have him kind of paying attention to that, and then as well as paying attention to the other team's defense, whereas I generally pay attention to the other team's offense, and then kind of give that feedback to our setters of, hey, make sure that you're communicating right now to the block that they're running this and this off of this serve receive, as well as paying attention to the other team's block. Hey, their middle is taking a step to the outside right now. They know that that's the direction that you're going. I'm going to need you to reverse or try something different, right? So I would say just those little intricacies. Most of the time I'm able to pay attention to those things. Sometimes I have to pay attention to what's happening on our side and kind of give feedback in that area. But if the boys are, playing discipline and playing with good energy and, being able to manage our side, I'm able to look at the other one a little bit more.
It sounds like in a way when you're observing the opposing teams, and it sounded like that is your main, observation point during a match. It almost sounds like you're kind of pulling back a little bit, trying to see the big picture and trying to kind of put the pieces of a puzzle together.
Right. So we prepare all week, right, for our weekend matches. So we'll generally watch film, a couple practices prior to when we play, and we'll practice what we need to. We'll practice the scouting report, right? So what we need to prepare for that specific opponent. So when it comes to an in-game setting, generally it's just if we need to make changes or adjustments where, I have to pay attention to that and give that feedback to the kids. But otherwise, they've been prepared for the specific opponent that we're playing. And for the most of the time, they're prepared for the changes that we can anticipate that opponent to make during an in-game. So it's kind of up to them to be able to adapt to that on the court, before I even have to tell them to do so, right? So, we try and take snapshots of the big picture, but most of the time I just try and trust the guys and let them do what they need to.
Mentioned earlier on, just as we were starting to record, and that is that a new conference now coming next year, the GLVC, as we look to the future a little bit. What kind of challenges are in store for the program as you transition to a new conference?
I feel that this year we've kind of experienced a lot of the challenges that we would have faced going into a new conference next year, if that makes sense, right? So this being our trial year in the NCAA, like I mentioned earlier, we've competed against a lot of the GLVC schools this season. The only one that we have not seen this year has been Southwest Baptist, but that's because their program will not be starting until next year. So, we were physically unable to play them. So I think, the challenges that we'll see next year might be minimal, and nothing that's unexpected from what we saw this year. As I mentioned earlier, the GLVC is going to be competitive. I'm really excited for that competition. There are a lot of very talented teams with deep rosters and talented coaches in that conference, and I think it's going to be exciting for us to try and make our way to being a top team. And there's a lot of opportunity for us to grow. There's a lot of opportunity for us to get exposure playing in this conference. And I'm excited. But I think the challenges, we kind of saw them this year. And so just kind of growing from the challenges that we saw this year to next year is going to be helpful. And I think for the most part, we're going to do okay. Go ahead.
Mentioning the move to the GLVC and having already played many of the teams in the conference this past season, it's got to give you, I think, maybe a little bit of a sense of comfort knowing that you have a little bit of a head start now going into next season.
Yeah, I think, we tried to play a couple of those teams last year as well, right? And to, give us a little bit of knowledge and exposure to what it is we're going to see. So, yeah, I feel comfort knowing, what kind of kids we need to recruit in order to be able to compete in that conference. Paying attention to the other talent that's, on the Maryvilles and the Missouri S&Ts, right? And knowing, hey, we got to make sure that we're recruiting to the level of these kids so that we have that opportunity to compete. And so I think that gives us a little bit of comfort knowing that we are bringing in talent that can compete in this conference. And just, having a little bit more background on the teams and being able to put ourselves in a position to be successful.
Men's volleyball coach Kelly Magliano joining us here on this edition of Making Waves. Coach, thanks for being with us, and best of luck as a new season will not be far away.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it, and we'll look forward to seeing you in the Goodman.